Isolated populations, including in this presentation, are refugees, homeless, elderly, and religious sects like polygamists. The media is how the public is educated and perceives what these populations are experiencing. The media plays a role in communicating what help is needed for these individuals. Correct and accurate information is critical to help these vulnerable populations. Determining family support for these individuals is very hard to do. Elderly left alone may not have any family left to care for them, or in some cases, their families don't know or might not care about the situations they are in. Homeless individuals have diverse backgrounds, and if they do have families, they are separated from them. Groups like polygamists live in family environments but keep to themselves. Refugees are coming to us as families in a lot of cases. Family support needs to be provided by the community and governments to help these individuals. In the cases of groups that choose to separate themselves from society or elderly that are alone, they will need government and state support. It is the responsibility of all to help those that can't help themselves. Again, this is a unique population when addressing the roles of peers. Isolated populations are just that, isolated, so it is hard to find out what they are getting from their peers. There are many resources available for anyone that needs help. The problem is accessing those resources. In cases like those of polygamous families, they don't know any different lifestyle. With refugees, they are coming from a foreign country, so all things are new. The community can help by volunteering at places that teach English and help these individuals integrate into society. There are resources available for those that want to leave the polygamous sex. There are places for the elderly where they can get the help they need and even Meals on Wheels to be delivered to their homes. We are all essentially peers helping each other out. In some cases, these populations know no difference. They have been born into these conditions. Mental illness affects many of the populations addressed, such as the homeless and refugees that are leaving everything they know to start over. With the help of the community and volunteers, isolated populations can receive help. Often, the legal and political system becomes a hindrance to these isolated individuals, whether it is on a local, state, or national level. The difficulties of participating in the legal and political system are due in part to their lower socioeconomic status and lack of understanding of how the legal or political system works. For many of these individuals, online information and resources are difficult to navigate due to lack of computer access and knowledge. In the case of refugees, there is the added language and cultural barriers, as well as the fact that the current political administration has drastically reduced the number of refugees that can enter the United States. There are numerous barriers that make these isolated populations more vulnerable within the larger community. These include illness and disability, loss of contact with family and friends, lack of supportive community, lack of social opportunities, lack of coping skills, fear of social rejection or exploitation, and fear of losing their preferred identities. The world's older population grows at an unprecedented rate. Today, 8.5% of the world's population is over the age of 65. By 2050, the elderly population is projected to be nearly 17% of the world's population. According to the United Nations, by the end of 2018, there was a record high of 70.8 million people that were forcibly displaced from their homes. With the increased number of these isolated populations comes the need to combat discrimination against migrants, people with disabilities, racial and religious discrimination worldwide. Our populations suffer from low socioeconomic status. Individuals of lower economic status are isolated from basic healthcare needs. Research shows that they have worse self-reported health, they have a lower life expectancy because they do not receive adequate care initially. Treatable illnesses become bigger problems. They suffer from chronic illnesses and receive fewer diagnostic tests and medications than individuals of higher socioeconomic status. Among our population are refugees and homeless. These vulnerable populations have a higher rate of African Americans and individuals of other ethnic groups. There are many social inequalities among people of different races, and healthcare is one of them. Individuals in this vulnerable population have a higher rate of illness and higher rate of impairment and death than average society. They see an earlier onset of illness and poorer quality of healthcare. In healthcare, it is important for providers to be culturally competent. When healthcare workers have biases or are uneducated about religious beliefs, members of that vulnerable population may receive poor quality care and be dissatisfied with their care. The communication between patients and providers may also be decreased. It is important for providers to be considerate of patients' spiritual and cultural needs. On the contrary, individuals that are part of a religious group may have more social support which can be gained from secular and religious experiences, organizations, and networks. This can lead to improved health outcomes. Women are more likely than men to live in a household without a living spouse, have fewer living children, but have better social support than men. Those that have a strong social network are healthier and ultimately live longer. Recent evidence suggests a link between poor social ties and severe conditions such as cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and cancer. Umberson and Montez also claim that those who are isolated and suffer from coronary artery disease have increased morbidity. Socialization is paramount to increasing the morbidity and mortality of isolated populations, and knowing that women are typically more social than men is important when trying to prevent disease and promote health. Geographical location has a significant effect on population health due to healthcare access, socioeconomic status, and chronic conditions. According to the Rural Health Information Hub, healthcare workers and number of physicians to the population are often not sufficient for the healthcare needs of the population, and specialized care is unheard of. If telehealth were incorporated or available to those in rural areas, then there will be better access to providers. Socioeconomic status is lower on rural regions, and people are often uninsured or are insured through Medicare or Medicaid. Geographic location often has implications on unsafe health-related behaviors such as smoking and drinking. Heart disease is the leading chronic condition, but cancer, unintentional injury, lower respiratory conditions, and stroke also affect those of rural populations more significantly than those in urban areas. Morbidity and mortality rates in the U.S. as of 2014 can be reviewed on the website provided in the slide. Implicit bias is an unconscious attitude projected towards members of certain social groups, races, ethnicities, or cultures. When implicit bias were put under the microscope in reference to healthcare, it was found that attitudes towards African Americans, Native Americans, and Latinos were negative in comparison to whites. Other attitudes consisted of a general belief that non-whites are non-compliant and engage in risky behavior. Explicit biases are conscious and more recognizable than implicit biases. For example, obese individuals were treated as a being of less value than thinner individuals, as if due to being obese they are lazy. Zescott, Blair, and Stone found that with healthcare providers, implicit bias is more prevalent than explicit. Germany, Sweden, the U.S., and Brazil are the best countries according to the Becker 2015 for refugees to seek asylum. The benefits that those seeking asylum can potentially experience include protection from violence, a place of residence, reunification with family members, economic security, and employment to provide for their families. Norway, Sweden, the U.S., and the Netherlands are ranked the top 4 countries to grow old. Reasons given include productivity, well-being, equity, cohesion, and security. The U.S. was noted for financial security, productivity, and being actively engaged. Homeless individuals would benefit most from a country of neutral climate, not too hot or too cold for their immediate physical needs. Japan, Denmark, Singapore, and Canada have the lowest rate of homelessness due to effective housing options. There is nothing more terrible than to be alone among human beings.